Okay. We're going to be talking today about information sources, where to find good ones, how to recognize whether something is a good source or not. And I was hoping I could find something here, but I'm not having much luck. So what we're going to actually do is go on Google. What happens if you put in, you guys are doing, what are your researches on? What?
The Nazi experiments on American.
Watch what happens. Let's see if it does it, what it does. Yep, there we go. Okay, so if you type in Nazi medical experiments, this is what happens. Not an acceptable search. So what happens when you see this? What can we do?
You go into Google and search for that. We didn't find that out.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, besides that, what else can you do? Besides cheating the system?
You can reword it.
Yes, we can reword it. So let's brainstorm for a minute. Okay, how do I do your smart board where I can...
On the smart board icon is the
There we go. Okay. So let's brainstorm for a minute. What are some other terms besides Nazi medical experiments that we could use?
experiments during the Holocaust.
So, experiments. What else? We've already tried Nazi. So we'll put that.
Inhumane. Decision of the language.
What?
We've been talking
Somebody else said, about decisions. I heard some, I didn't catch what it was.
Inhumane.
Right? We can do Germany. I'm just gonna start adding. So we can kind of combine these, right? But let's just get the individual words. So what other things besides experiments?
If we know the specific year that they happened, we can get the year down. 1940.
Okay.
How? Like prisoner of war.
They weren't really concerned before.
Concentration camp.
There we go. That's what I'm looking
I think somebody got pregnant.
Two great minds come to life.
Those two.
I'm not supposed to have the paper for
I think you did.
for. Okay, concentration camps. Who were the captives?
Jews.
What about specific names? Do we know some of the names?
And Frank.
No,
She wasn't experiments on.
Right. Do we know their names?
No.
I don't know how to spell it.
English lady.
I don't know if that's right. So I'd want to look that up. But we could look up in specific concentration camps where they were doing that, right? Do we know some of those names?
Auschwitz. Was one of them Auschwitz?
Yeah.
I was
Twin.
I think
No.
Ravensbrück was another
Oh,
one.
yeah.
Okay, we got a pretty good start here. So that gives us, so now we've got a whole bunch of words. So you can spend some time brainstorming those different keywords, and then we can go back to Google and try putting them in. And let me see if I can remember which one I used. Didn't write it down. All right, so let's go back to Google. And let's try Holocaust.
It is. How did Hitler tie his shoes?
Oh,
And little Nazis.
Okay, so look at that. I love it. The very first one that comes up, Nazi medical experiments. So dumb. Okay, now we've got a bunch of websites. So how do we determine what the quality of those websites are before we even click on any of them? There's some good information here.
By going straight to
Let's look at,
on gray stuff.
Okay, so let's look at the different things. They tell us a little bit about it. So the very first one, it's a .org, which means what? There's some sort of organization. We don't know what the organization is yet. Okay, we might have, but it tells us right here, the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. How reputable do you think that's going to be?
Very reputable.
Probably going to be okay. So that's one we might want to look at. This one says remember.org. It's not telling us where it's from, so we would have to look at that one. Wikipedia.
No.
Why?
Because
Because
it can't
people
be
can
verified.
Because anyone can get on.
Anyone can get on. Anyone can change it. What?
We have to double check.
Right. Does it mean that there's no good information on Wikipedia?
You can use it as a springboard.
She's been listening to me. Yes. If we could actually get on Wikipedia, I could show you how you could use it as a springboard to other sites. Because if you go down to the bottom, they list sources, right? So we can look at the sources Wikipedia used, or people who use Wikipedia might have put it, and that can be a springboard. But Wikipedia itself, we don't know, right? That's the problem. We just don't know who put the information in and whether or not we can trust it. So that's why we don't want to use Wikipedia. Okay, what about this one? Why?
Because Nova is a trustworthy, I would say. I don't know if that's
Not quite. Close. That's close. Reputable.
reputable.
Okay. So what is NOVA?
National organization, very affirmative.
All right, so NOVA is a TV program, right? It's a TV show on PBS.
It's like a documentary.
Documentary. They do documentaries. So probably this is going to be a pretty good site. We have the Jewish Virtual Library. We don't know what that is. Okay, so we're going to click on this one. And let's see if we can figure out some information about it. Okay, so just looking on here we go. We know it is a project of the American Israeli Cooperative Enterprise, but we don't really know what that is, right? Okay, it sounds fancy. You're right. How can we find out maybe how this works? Where would we go?
Well, it says like the Holocaust history.
Yeah, but we're trying to find out, first of all, whether or not we can trust this site. So how do we do that?
At the very bottom.
Bibliography.
Let's go to About Us. Yes, the bibliography would be another place we would want to check. Why?
Because it shows where they got their
Right. The bibliography is going to tell us where they got the stuff that they put up here. Okay, so it tells us that this is a nonprofit, nonpartisan. What does that mean? What's nonprofit mean? Okay, the purpose of their site is not to make money. What does nonpartisan mean? What do you think partisan?
Okay, because like these women who like fought
It means that it is not aligned with a political party.
there's no party.
Right. So this is not, they aren't aligned with any particular, they're not aligned with Republicans or Democrats or conservatives or liberals. Their goal is basically this idea of Americans and Israelis working together. Does that mean it's not biased? No. They have a bias, but they're very upfront in telling us what their bias is. That in itself is useful. Okay, here it tells us what their mission statement is. It's for research, study, discussion, and exchange of views to facilitate formation of partnership between Israeli and Americans, publicize joint activities, explore issues, sponsor research. Okay, so that's telling us a little bit about it. The other thing we want to look at would be, let's see. I know that's in here. We want to know who the authors are. I thought there was a place. Let me look. Oh, right here. Okay, so we also have about the Jewish Virtual Libraries can tell us a little bit about. If we go to biographies, I believe that will tell us, okay, so this tells us about the people who put together the website. the executive director of the America-Israeli Alliance. We know that he works in foreign policy. That's what his expertise is in. He's been doing this organization since 1993. He has a PhD. Not just that he has a PhD, but what is it in? It's in political science with a master's degree from Berkeley and a BA in economics. So those 3 degrees would be the appropriate degrees for something like this, right? Now, what if he said he had a PhD in zoology?
Not the best person.
Right, then it would not be the best person to be writing about these issues. You see that kind of thing happen all the time. Just because a site is an EDU or an ORG doesn't mean it's a good site. You want to look and see, do they have the credentials to be writing about it? So this guy seems to be pretty well established. You can see he's on, some of the things that he's done. He worked, for instance, as an analyst with George W. or H.W. Bush. Mr. Ellie Berman looks like he also he's working on a master's, so he doesn't have as much education in that particular field, but he's been in foreign service. He graduated Phi Beta Kappa, which is an honor society. Okay, so if we look through all of these, we can see it looks like for the most part, these guys have, the education and the interests and the experience to be writing about it. Okay. All right, let's go back to some of the things. So if we look on here, we've got, okay, so there's kind of a lot of information you could explore. We're not going to explore that much. But this would be, what do you think? Do you think this would be a pretty reputable site?
Yes.
It looks to me. I think on the surface, it seems like there's good information, and we could double check that. Let's go back to our Google page, and let's look at a couple more. Okay, now something I'm noticing, look at the next few. Do you see how many are coming from the same site? And we've already looked at it, and we feel pretty good about it. But what if we want to be able to broaden our search? We want to see some other ones. So we want to look at this same topic, but not this particular site. Not necessarily because it's bad. Sometimes it's because it's not at all what you're looking for, but maybe just because, a lot keeps coming up from that, and I want to look at some other sites. Let me show you a trick on Google. If we go up here, and you use the minus sign, let me think. I had to practice this because you have to do it exactly right. So I forgot to bring the note on that. And then put in, what's the site? I gotta look at the site. Virtual. I'm gonna copy it. No, this is not plagiarism. And I'm putting it in quotes. Let's see if that works. No, darn it. Okay, I can put a space here. There we go. Okay, so put a space in front of your minus sign, and then you put a minus in sign. Now you'll notice that it's bringing up other things. So it's searching, but it's pulled that site out of my search results. So that can be useful when, number one, like in this case, we had a site that just kept coming up, and we're like, okay, we've looked at it, we know we want to look at it some more, but I want to see what else is out there. Or, right, we don't want to look at Wikipedia, so we could go up here and do that and change this to, I think so. Let's just do that. Now I've pulled off any kind of wiki. And I could do it again. So if I go off of this, let's go here and let's do space minus, put that in. Okay, now I've taken both of those off. So even on Google, you can be more specific. You can control your search a little bit so that you're getting higher quality things. You can also choose a specific site to search. So let's say we wanted to look at these, and let's say we wanted to put in that site. I'm going to move this real quick. Oops. at the front of, I don't know if you have to do it on the front, but that's how I've always done it. You can do site, colon, and then let's put in the name since I already have it pasted. Now everything is coming from that site.
Oh, wow. You did a lot of stuff.
So if you knew, for instance, that, oh, there was that article in the New York Times and I saw it and I don't remember when it was, I don't remember what it was, but I know I got it from the New York Times, you can search just the New York Times by putting site and the New York Times website. Okay? All right, let's take those off now. Okay, so those two things, site with a colon, no space between site and the colon, and then your term, or a space after a space and then the minus sign and no space between the minus sign and your term that you don't want included. So it could be even just a term. So if you were looking for, you didn't want to know, you wanted to search on, let me think. Let's say you wanted to look for something on Three Little Pigs and you keep coming up with a barbecue joint called the Three Little Pigs. You could put minus barbecue and then it would not show you any sites. Or when we were doing Utopia, we were looking at Utopia and it kept bringing up the TV show Utopia. You could do minus TV show or minus television. Does that make sense? So it's not just particular sites. You can also limit, certain kinds of things that you don't want when you've got something that has a double meaning. Okay. Let's take that off. Let's go back to just our general site. Okay, so let's look at this one. Another thing that you'll want to do when you're doing research is pay attention to terms that come up as you're searching. So remember we had our brainstorming list that we were doing. You're going to keep adding to that list. Keep notes on the keywords that work. So for instance, Nazi medical experiments didn't work for us, right? What did work? Holocaust medical experience. Just changing that thing. Right, keep a note, keep a journal, and keep track of the things that work better for you or things that don't work. And as you're reading and doing research and you come across things like names or concentration camps, so down here at the German concentration camps of Sachsenhausen, Dachau, Natzweiler, Buchenwald, and Neuengamme, scientists tested immunization compounds, blah, 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 blah. So now I have specific, remember we were talking about what were the specific concentration camps. Did they do medical experiments at all of the concentration camps? No. So we can search specifically on the concentration camps that we know did. All right, so as you come across in your reading, as you come across things that help you be more specific in your searching, then you're going to want to use them. The other thing that you might come across are related. Okay, so let's look at this. Encyclopedia last updated June 20th, 2014. So how recent is this?
Pretty recent.
Why does that matter?
Because it's like 20 years old.
They could have figured something out in the present, like recently than before when they said maybe in 2003 figured something perfectly figured something out.
Right. So things can change. Things can change, and sometimes we want to do that. Now you'll notice at the bottom of this page, we have resources for academics and research, resources for educators. So you might want to look at some of the programs, some of the things that they have, kind of explore the pages a little bit and see what other information. Whenever you find a really good source, a lot of times you want to look and see where are they getting their information from, and you can go directly maybe to that source and find stuff. All right, let's talk for a minute then about the kinds of sources that we might see. So we focused on websites and kind of evaluating websites. Websites can range from really good to really bad. And we really have to do all the things we've done, look at those things to determine whether or not it's good. Let's go down here to this one. Can I erase that? Undo writing. Oh, it just did, sorry. Farther, clear page, okay. Okay, So the kinds of sources, what are some of the kinds of sources that we might be searching? Okay, let's do it this way. We just looked at websites, so we'll write that down.
Oh,
Types. What other types? Not
Books.
Books. Good. Okay, what would be maybe the advantages or disadvantages of books from websites?
Because they have to go through it.
Okay, right.
the
Yes, we have two really good statements over here. That and
I didn't hear what she said, but right, same thing. Like, that websites are a lot easier to find when like books you have to go and like check them out and like look for whatever you want. Whatever like in websites you can just type it in and it comes up.
Okay, so websites are lots of times easier. Books may go through a more a finer tube editorial process, right? They might have a bigger editorial process. What else?
Books might have better information, but they're updated a lot less often, and we've changed a lot of facts in the last 60 years.
Okay, so time could be an issue, right? A website. Now remember, just because it's a website, does that mean it is the most current? Not necessarily. That's why we have to check that date, right? If it hasn't been updated in 10 years, you're no better off than a book that's 2 years old. Probably better off.
the book that we're reading may have been wrote or written in the by a victim, like the author, like Corey Kingdom. She wrote, I think, something that's 100% good.
Okay. And we can probably see that on both of them. But, yes, we'll talk about magazines in a minute. Just a minute. So, I'm going to talk about what she mentioned in the depth. What do I mean by depth that a book can cover, the subject, or subject? A lot more details. So think about a lot more pages, right? Which may make it more difficult to find stuff, but it means there's a lot. They're looking at it a lot more closely and with a lot more depth than a website can do. A website is usually going to be much more over the top. It's going to be shallower. There may be more information, but you won't get as deep into the subject as you could in a book. An editor that I really like by the name of Mark Aronson. He's an editor and an author. And in one of his books, he talked about doing research, and he uses both books and internet. And he said the thing that he likes about books, he uses this metaphor that there's time for the information to cook. What do you think he means by that? Think about when you make a soup. If you make a soup and you throw everything in the pot and eat it right away, how's it taste? It's not so good, right? But if you let those flavors cook and meld and mix together, that's when it's really good. Like that stew that's been sitting in the crock pot all day, ooh, that's really good because all those flavors have a chance to really work together. That's what he's talking about in a book. In a book, you have the time to really think about what you're writing about. The author has the time to really think. It's not just what came out right away. It's not just that news report that came right away. There's a lot of time and effort involved and a lot more thinking deeply and critically about an issue. And that's why he likes to make sure he includes books in whatever research he does. He likes the immediacy of the internet, and there's some wonderful sources on the internet, especially for some of the primary sources we're looking for that you have access to. But he also likes the time that comes, the thought that goes behind the creation of a book. There's a lot more thought involved. So that's something to think about. Okay, websites and books. What else are here? Magazines. What kind of things are we going to find in magazines? Articles. So shorter than books, right? Maybe not as current as websites, but probably going to be pretty current, or can be. That's right. Right. What's the editorial process of a magazine?
It's a lot more edited than a website, but not as edited as a book.
Okay, so it could be more. And remember, websites are they vary. Websites, we've got to kind of think of. There's lots of levels. So on some websites, there's no editing, And on some websites, there's a lot of editing. So we have to remember that that's a very fluid. But definitely magazines are not going to have as high of an editorial standard as books because they're working on time. They're getting it out faster. But more of an editorial presence on the screen. On the screen. Okay. I lost what I'm saying. Okay, so somebody writes who writes for a magazine? A reporter, journalist, right? Are they experts in what they're writing about?
Yes.
They sort of make themselves become sort of an expert, a mini expert on that topic, right? They do a lot of research. A good journalist does a lot of research, checks the sources. He submits it to the magazine. Does it get printed right away?
No.
What happens?
The editor.
What does the editor do?
He looks for it. He sees if like it puts a good image to the magazine and people will actually be intrigued by it.
Right, so he's making sure it fits the readership of their magazine. He's checking grammatical errors. Hopefully there aren't a lot as a professional writer. He's also going to be checking the sources that the person wrote, right? So that's that step in between that we want. Okay, what about academic journals then? What's that?
It's like scientific American.
Yes. Or Nature, or the New England Journal of Medicine. Those are all scientific journals. They're all academic journals. So what's the difference between an academic journal and a magazine?
An academic journal is more professional or more educated.
Okay, who writes for academic journals?
Experts in the field.
Who writes on this one? Okay, so we have experts in the field. So this is somebody who spent their life studying that subject. New England Journal of Medicine, who writes for that? Doctors, medical researchers, right? They're experts in the field. What happens when they finish their article or their research paper?
It gets edited.
Before it gets edited. Peer review. Okay, it goes what's called a peer review process. That means that other people, another group of people who are also experts in that field, yeah, some of these guys have already heard it, that's why we have all the answers. They are also experts in the field. They are other doctors, other researchers, whatever, and they look through that there to check, did this person follow the correct procedures? Where did they get their data from? Were they, did they follow the protocol that is expected?
So like constructive criticism?
Sort of, yeah. And they will look through that first, and they're checking all of those things, and when they give their stamp of approval, then it goes to the editor, and remember that editor is also going to be an expert in the field. And then that editor, and then after that editor approves it, then it gets published. So which of these is the most academically rigorous?
Academic journal.
Right? This is the one that's really being checked. We really can trust the stuff that's coming out of this better than probably any of these others. All right. So let's do this. Let's organize this. Well, let's see. We also have views. Views is kind of with magazines, but a little different, right?
Yeah, it's a little less.
What would make it less reliable than say magazine?
Because reporters are trying to find stuff that's interesting, so they might change the
Okay, that's a possibility. The other issue is time. A newspaper comes out how often? Every day. So it's going to be the most recent, but there hasn't been that time to double check. Let me give you an example. How many of you guys know about Columbine? You guys know what we're talking about with Columbine? Columbine was a big school shooting that happened about, 15 years ago? And one of the things that happened with Columbine, this was huge news. I mean, it was like all anything was going on. But the reporters were so quick, they wanted to get that information out to people so fast that some of the stuff that they put out there immediately wasn't fact checked. And a lot of times they said that, this is what we think is what happened. But the problem is with the internet, this was in the earlier days of the internet, things get picked up a lot faster. And pretty soon everybody's quoting each other. And there were things that were put out early, in the investigation or in the reporting of it that were wrong, completely wrong and inaccurate. But it got repeated so many times that everybody thought it was true. And it really wasn't until years later that people started pulling out and saying, look, here's what really happened. And that was one of the dangers. That can be one of the dangers that happens with news. Is sometimes as we're getting the information, it takes us a while to get the information accurately. So you want to be careful with that. You want to think about that. And what happens is then we go back and look at those original ones. We look at those first news things that come out. And if you don't check the later ones, you're going to report things that were not accurate. Not actually. Okay, so let's put these in order of maybe usefulness and reliability. What do you think is the most reliable? So they're at the top of the food chain. What's next?
Books.
I'm going to put books to the side. The disadvantage of books over academic journals is time. They're not going to be as relevant. The advantage of books to journals or magazines is what? Thought. Thought and depth. Okay, so they're in some ways better than journals and in some ways worse. You have to think about why you use it. That's why a lot of times your teachers will tell you they want both. Okay, what's going to be next?
Magazines.
Is there going to be a little bit of a hierarchy on magazines too? Think about the kinds of magazines. Cosmopolitan, down at the bottom. People, down at the bottom. National Geographic, going to be a little higher.
Right? National Geographic is an academic journal or magazine?
It's a magazine. It was more of a journal at one time, but it really has become more of a magazine. It's not a peer-reviewed journal. Let me put it that way. Okay. Then websites. Okay, and websites are going to go, yes, I'm going to put websites here.
It depends on
Right. There are going to be some websites that are going to be better than magazines, and some websites that are going to be worse.
like Wikipedia.
Okay? So you can go probably both places. You have to check that, right? You are the one that's going to have to check those, where they're getting their sources from, who's doing the writing, all of that. Okay? What's the bottom? And some websites are going to be down here with Wikipedia, right? Some websites are no better than Wikipedia because, you know, they're totally fabricated. So on websites, you really have to use those evaluating things in all of these sources, but especially you need to on some of the sources where there's not a consistent rigor on how it's set up, okay? There's nobody that says if you're doing a website, you have to follow these procedures. So that's why we have everything, you know, we have really very well done websites that are factual and they are checking their sources and they're current, and we have really terrible websites that really care less about facts. You just really have to, because there's no other protocol. Right, okay, so thank you. Social media. Let's put that in there. Where does that go? And that includes not only Facebook and Twitter and things like that, but please, comments. Actually, it's safe as at the high school. Our kids are quoting from the comments on a news report. Why would we not want to use that as a source?
Because it's their opinion.
Totally biased. Right, is there any editorial process on the comments?
No.
Usually not. There may be somebody who will quote inappropriate comments and may block them. But by inappropriate, we just mean hateful or, you know, language, that sort of thing. Really, there's no editorial process at all on these. That's what makes them essential. Does it mean that there's not always good information? Yeah, there may be good information on any of those things. But they're not things we're going to cite because we can't prove that they're factual. We can't use that as evidence. It would be like hearsay in court. It's not acceptable as evidence for our argument.
What do you mean as in they like comment the singular like?
Right, so when you go to a news story, you go to Portales News Tribune, or you go to the New York Times, and you read the article, and then there will be a place where people can comment on the article, right? So if you're reading through the comments to see what people think about it, you can't use that as your information to support you. Well, this guy said that blah, 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 blah. So that would not be good information. Any questions about that? Does that make sense to you, how that kind of works? So when you're looking for information on your paper, think about where you're getting your information from and how you're looking for it. And evaluate those sources and think about where they fall on this sort of continuum. Yeah, I just wasn't having very good luck finding good stuff on there. But let me show you how to get there. Yes, let me show you. So if you go to Portales Schools, and then you will click on Alexandria, and this will be all recorded, so you can go back and find what school do you go to?
Junior high.
Junior high. So even if you're doing this from home, you still would click on the junior high. And then here you'll click on researcher. This takes you to the catalog. So for instance, if you wanted to look for some books in your library, this is the site that you would go to. Okay?
So even at home, if you think of something, I wonder if our library has,
You could look it up. Okay? Then over on the left side where it says links, there are a lot of different links on here. Let me see. You will probably want to use this middle school one. I'm looking to see. Yes, it is. This is the state. These are state databases. So what a database does is it takes print journals and magazines and reference materials and puts them in an online format for you to use.
wait, so would we do that as magazine?
Well, that's the beauty of it, is that there's a combination of things. Okay, so there's 3 different databases here: Junior Edition, Opposing Viewpoints in Context, and the Student Edition. These two, Junior and Student, are both very similar. The Student Edition has a little higher level resources. Okay, but as an honors class, you could probably access some of those things. Most of them are full text, meaning it has the whole article there for you to access. Opposing Viewpoints in Context is looking at issues, and that's why I don't think it's going to be very good for Holocaust. All right, so let's click on Student Edition. Actually, I already have it open, so okay. So here you can see how you can select. Do you want, if we go to the advanced search, and then we put in Holocaust. You can look and see Holocaust victims. Maybe that might be a good one to search. Let's try that. Well, no, let's not. Let's just go back to Holocaust. Oops. Over here on the side, you can see that we have 4,000, can't read that, 4,000 magazine articles. There's over 2,000 academic journals, 14 books, 6,000 news. There's some images, there's some videos, and there's some audios. You'd probably want to refine that, because that's kind of a lot. That's where I was having trouble, is getting them to be refined, because every time I tried things like medical experiments, it just all goes away. I don't know.
Wait, hold on. Make sure you're familiar with this bit, and especially looking at sources and validity of sources. We're going to delve into that just a bit more while looking on your research proposals. Hold on, listen first 2 seconds.
Brianna Dixon to the office, please. Brianna Dixon, come to the office.
Make sure you have signed out Chromebook if you've signed in. It's imperative that you guys remember to do that.
How did you?